Good evening. The Planning Commission meeting of June 15th, 2022 is called to order. The Planning Commission meeting is being broadcast live on Glendale TV, viewable on Spectrum Cable, Channel 6, and AT&T UVerse, Channel 99. Meetings are also streamed live in high definition on the city's webpage, glendaleca.gov/live, on youtube.com/Mike Glendale, and on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire devices using a free app called ScreenWeave and choosing Glendale TV from the menu. Meetings are also archived on the city website for viewing anytime at glendaleca.gov/agendas. For public comments and questions during the meeting, please call 818-937-8100. City staff will be submitting the questions and comments in real time to the appropriate person. Current Planning Commission agendas are available visiting our website at www.glendaleca.gov. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Tarachian?
Here.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Here.
Commissioner Manassian?
Here.
Commissioner Shabazian? Chairperson Lee.
Here. Reports regarding posting of agenda.
The agenda for the June 15th, 2022 regular meeting of the Glendale Planning Commission was posted on June 8th, 2022 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Approval of minutes.
Entertain a first and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have first and second, okay.
Approved as submitted.
Okay, next item is an oral communication. Do we have any? See none?
See none, and there are no phone calls.
Okay.
Clearly.
Do we have any commissioner comments?
No.
Okay. Next item is oral business. The item is 3810 through 3816 4th Avenue. Tentative parcel map PPM 2113643 GLN 1644. And I think this is being continued today.
That's correct. We're, Chairperson Lee, staff is requesting that this item be continued to the Planning Commission meeting of August 17th, 2022 without further public notice.
Okay. Can we have a motion?
Yeah, so moved. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay.
And I think we should do roll call just for safety's sake. Commissioner Tarachian?
Yes.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Yes.
Commissioner Manassian?
Yes.
Chairperson Lee.
Aye. Okay, the next item is a new business. I don't see anything here, none. Item number 8, Community Development Department updates. And there's a presentation here, Verdugo Wash project update.
Yes, Chairperson Lee, I'd like to introduce Bradley Calvert, Assistant Director of Community Development, to give us an update on the Verdugo Wash project.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. Back in fiscal year 2020 and 2021, City Council had allocated funding to study the possibility of the Verdugo Wash serving as a multimodal active transportation spine with a number of other priorities that we'll go through today in the presentation. We are entering, or really we're kind of closing out what we're calling the visioning stage of this project. The goal of this visioning stage was to kind of identify what is possible, what could actually be done inside that wash while still preserving the wash's role as a flood control channel. We cannot compromise that, obviously. So this portion of the study was really to understand what is possible. It's really kind of the first piece as we try to realize a potential vision for the wash. What we'd like to do today is kind of give an overview of where we're at, a little bit of background information, what some of the designs kind of hold, what next steps are, and the intent here today is to get your feedback and your input. Our plan is to take a final report for this portion of the work to City Council around August or September. So this is our first meeting amongst the boards and commissions. We'll be going around and soliciting that feedback and input if there's any kind of additional considerations. I would note that the renderings that you'll see look like a very finalized design in many ways, but again, we are at a very, very early stage. So there's a lot of pieces that aren't being shown. There's a lot of pieces that are missing. There's a lot of opportunity here to include other concepts and other ideas. Is that live on there?
It is.
On the screen. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Not working. Now it works. There we go. So again, the overview, to highlight the project goals and the description of what this project is really intended to be and what it's intended to accomplish. We're going to provide a couple precedent examples, some inspiration projects, if you will, some areas where we can aspire to be, goals and ideas that we can incorporate into the project. We'll go through some of the design concepts. I'll note that they are not location specific. They are really looking more about the potential width. The wash varies in its width and its depth along its entire route. So these designs aren't intended to be at a specific intersection or a very specific point, but rather just representative of what those different conditions are in the wash. We'll go over some of the public input that we've heard and some of the engagement that we've done, and then what the next steps will be as part of this project. So the Verdugo Wash is about a 9.5-mile long flood control channel. It is part of the Los Angeles River tributary. What's important to note is that this touches 15 distinct different neighborhoods. One of the charges as part of the scope of work here is to ensure that the designs reflect and represent each of the 15 different neighborhoods, meet the needs, the desires. We'll get into some of that information, some of that detail of how we may have a different recommendation than we expected going into this project, with some constraints both with preferences from some of the neighborhoods, but also just some of the engineering and hydrology constraints that are there. Really kind of the three main goals to this project were active transportation first and foremost. The project was identified in the original 2012 bicycle transportation plan as a active transportation spine, intended to connect many of the north-south routes that were identified in that bicycle transportation plan. That's actually something that we just started the process of updating, which will take into this project into account. But it would create a protected, separated spine, essentially, for pedestrians and cyclists, removed from the conflicts of automobile traffic, connecting to other significant transportation alternatives. The second portion of this is really the opportunity to create open space, where we can create green space within the wash, where we can use some of the additional width that's present as you move kind of south and west, especially as you get to Glendale Community College and further down. There's a lot of opportunity to incorporate social spaces, open spaces, plazas, things of that nature. And then sustainability. We found ourselves a little more limited to what we could do from some sustainability aspects with this project that we were hoping in the beginning. What we had heard from many members of the public is they really wanted to see a soft river bottom restored. We see that as part of the LA River in their project that's going on. What we found out is that really isn't possible here because there is not a continuous flow of water. This was a creek at one point, but it's been many, many decades since a continuous stream of water has flown down this channel. Because of that, it can't really withstand or really promote wildlife, vegetation, things of that nature to really survive on its own. We also found that given the constraints of the width and the height of the wash, if we were to soften the bottom of that wash, it would really slow down the river flows. Right now, when there are major storm events, that water can move anywhere from 20 to 40 miles an hour at times. If we were to soften that bottom, that slows down the flow. That means the amount of water being held in the wash goes up too high, and then we could potentially create a flood condition. So the design alternatives you'll see today are an alternative to that approach to still accomplish those three kind of primary objectives, and still be able to meet some of those goals and intents that were set out from that. These are just some example pictures of what the existing conditions of the wash currently look like now. Again, not emphasizing any particular condition, but what you can see is we have a box channel in many cases that can be up to 12 feet deep to 16 feet deep. So again, it varies. The width varies in many different locations. We have chamfered channels going through the Oakmont Country Club. We have narrower widths where actually when you get to some of the far northern portions, you can really extend your arms and touch both sides of the walls. That's where we found a lot of limitations, but it is very unique as you move down the route. So there's opportunities to rather just employ a single contiguous design through the entire 9.5 miles, we could create something that kind of reflects those different conditions and also those neighborhoods. We also have a number of opportunities for get downs. There's existing access points that are already there today that could be enhanced. There's opportunities for new ones. You can see in some of the images here, some of our historic bridges that cross there represent some opportunities to get down into that space. We had looked at a number of different alternatives in the beginning. Do we have people on the floor of the wash? Do we raise people up and just kind of lid the wash? What we found is that when we actually got into the channel, back in April of 2021, the design team and city staff went into the channel. We rode the entire route on bicycles to kind of investigate opportunities. The channel itself wouldn't lend itself to using the floor. There's existing algae that grows there because of some water flows that are there. But also more importantly, it creates a lot of challenges in terms of people getting down and getting back out of the wash, especially from an ADA perspective. So what you'll see today is kind of a median in between. And we'll go through some of the different scenarios that could exist with that. But the project is largely about access and opportunity. This is 9.5 miles long. It runs through suburban areas. It runs through areas that are relatively wild in terms of vegetation. It runs through urban areas. Connects our primary employment center of downtown, Glendale Community College. There's elementary schools, several parks along the wash. There are a lot of opportunities to connect residents, especially as we start to look at our pedestrian plan and our bicycle plan and where we update that to be able to create additional access and opportunity to get into the wash. There's a slide towards the end. We'll be able to show the range of how far someone can go, anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes on a bicycle. And that range is expanded quite significantly from just using existing access points to adding additional ones. So again, there's a lot of key opportunities here, especially around some civic uses, public uses, institutional uses to create access and opportunity. As part of this project, we looked at several different precedents. This first example that we're showing here, this is the barn in West Sacramento, California. The design team, Melk, from New York City, had actually designed this project. This was something that we set out and looked at in terms of the public open space, the social spaces that could be created. There's opportunity for parks and green spaces, but there's also opportunities for kind of unique sculptural elements, plazas, especially in the downtown area near the Glen Oaks commercial corridor, where we could actually create very active and vibrant spaces for people to get together and enjoy this space, this kind of repurposed space. So this is just one example of the kind of projects that we were looking at in terms of creating those kind of activated social spaces. Another project that we looked at is the Atlanta Beltline. This is about a 26-mile line. It's a former rail line in the city of Atlanta that they are converting into a pedestrian and cyclist path. In fact, they've completed a number of miles of it, but certain segments that have opened up have really changed the way the city has thought about transportation. That is because it does connect to their primary employment centers. It connects to some key neighborhoods. It's catalyzed redevelopment. One of the projects that we looked at is the example that you see here. This is called the Old Fourth Ward Park. This used to be a parking lot for a former Sears warehouse distribution center. The city of Atlanta had a very significant stormwater issue that they needed to resolve here. In the summertime, rains come down in torrential downpours, and they needed to figure out a way to pipe or get that stormwater out. They could spend $48 million on a pipe, or they could build this park for about $20 million is what they ended up accomplishing. The reason why we looked at this is because we do have opportunities in the wash and adjacent to the wash where we could convert spaces such as parking lots or underutilized parcels or parcels that can't even be built on right now that could perform this kind of role. Opportunities for water capture, stormwater treatment, and one of the unique aspects about this project is that it's designed to flood. Everything that you see here, those bridges, everything is designed to be submerged in water. That again was one of the principles that we kind of took when we looked at this project, because if we start putting things in there, we do need to recognize that there may be times that there are going to be significant rain events and that whatever we build in there could be submerged. It needs to be able to withstand that. What you can see in the very background of the wall kind of to the right are two lines. That first line represents the 100-year flood event. The second one represents a 500-year. They've actually had 2 to 3 100-year events in this park. So it has been submerged, it has withstood, and those are the kind of principles that when we talk about habitat restoration, sustainability, open space, these are the kind of principles that we're looking at. And then obviously active transportation. So we looked at a number of different projects with this. This is an example from Chicago, the 606, again, a former rail line that's been converted into a bicycle and pedestrian path. But those opportunities to connect people to places, people to jobs, people to education, neighborhoods to neighborhoods. We talk about a 9.5-mile trail. It does not mean, and largely most people will not ride the full 9.5 miles. This is going to be kind of a pearls on the string. People are going to connect from one neighborhood to another. They're going to go up 1 or down 2. They're not going to typically be using the entire trail. So this is an example of an existing typical box condition. These lines represent the different kind of flood conditions, the events that can occur. It should be noted that we haven't had any 100-year events in this or 50-year events since this has been constructed, but we are, as part of the hydrology analysis, taking into account a number of different factors to still preserve that opportunity, even though we haven't seen a 50-year or a 100-year event yet, that it could still happen, particularly with instances of climate change. We like to think about drought instances. We're going through one right now, but we can also find ourselves in much more significant storms that may occur. Maybe they're less frequent, but they can be much more significant. So we need to preserve that opportunity. So each of those lines kind of represents those different conditions that inform the analysis. What we have is an example of a potential condition. And what I'll say is that when we look at this, this is just one example. The width of this can be different. It may not go wall to wall. The height of it could be different because we want to consider things like privacy, because there are single family neighborhoods in some conditions. There are some places with commercial activity where we would like people to be able to get out of the wash. In fact, one of the positives of the Atlanta Beltline is that a number of the businesses who once had their back faced to that rail line have now turned their stores the other way. They turn their back on their parking lots because most of their customers are coming in from the Beltline. Those are opportunities we could have in downtown near the Glen Oaks commercial corridor. So the height of this could vary. This is not a set datum line for the entire route, nor is the width kind of set either. There's a number of different kind of kit of parts that will be developed from a safety perspective and privacy perspective that you may not always see this come all the way to the edge of the walls. There may be a gap to prevent people from being able to climb in and out from points where we don't want them to. But what you see is a raised platform. Essentially, this can go up 5, 8, 10 feet, depending on the depth of the wash, allowing the typical flows of the vertical wash to go underneath the system. Not impeding on it, but you can see that the top few lines there for those very significant rain events, this would submerge parts of it. But again, kind of building off those principles of that old Fourth Ward Park, designed in a manner, materials used in a manner that could be flooded in these kind of conditions. Now, because we can't do a soft river bottom, the intent here is to create very deep planting wells, very deep vegetation wells, if you will, so that we could actually have substantial trees, substantial vegetation that could run the full route of this. We are working with our fire division to make sure that we're using fire-resistant planting, following all of their guidelines, especially as we get into neighborhoods that are less urban, that have other vegetation around it to prevent things like wildfires, to kind of make sure that we ensure that safety. But the goal here is to create separate paths as well, separating pedestrians and cyclists, making sure that there are not any conflicts. Again, this is a pretty it's not a steep downhill grade, but it is a downhill grade, and that does mean accelerated speed for cyclists. So making sure that they're separated from pedestrians, making sure that we reduce those conflicts. It's not always possible, but for the most part, it is wide enough to be able to do that. This is another example, again, kind of showing the varying heights that could exist. In this case, we do see a few opportunities where we could soften the center of the channel, only the center of it though, to allow a little bit of vegetation to grow, to do a little bit of stormwater recapture where possible. But you can also still see those planting wells there, for trees, for vegetation. You can see the varying heights of the pedestrian and cyclist routes. You may not see all three of these conditions in one section, but the intent here is to illustrate the different heights that could exist. If you look at the one that's kind of second from the right, that would be a condition where we can ensure privacy from surrounding neighborhoods. The height of it does not go above the wall. And that's why we've created this kind of kit of parts, if you will, different scenarios, different opportunities that could be applied to each of the different unique circumstances as we move forward in the design. This is an example from one of the narrower portions, if you will. So again, we don't have quite enough room here to be able to create a separate pedestrian path and a separate cyclist path. But you can see there are opportunities to incorporate kind of softened materials. This is a concrete channel. It's very harsh. It also causes a lot of echoing. Opportunities here to soften it with different materials, vegetation. We are considering a public art plan as we go into next phases if council directs us to move in that direction. Ways that we can treat this kind of utilitarian structure that can mitigate some of those effects. But you can see enhanced vegetation here. You can see that get down point from the stairs. There would be ramps that would be incorporated as well. So again, just kind of another example, or just an example, but not very specific or at a very specific location. The narrower channel locations are going to pose a greater challenge for this project. Because there is not enough, not as much room, if you will, to hold the water. What we like to use as a reference point is, say you have a glass of water. There's only so much ice you can put in that before it starts to overflow. Essentially, anything that we put inside this channel is that ice. So if we put too much in there, the water starts to overflow. What we have found in the northern segments are a couple different things. One, we would probably need to change either the width or the depth. The width is not an option because there are properties that are abut it. The depth could be an option, but it would be a very, very expensive endeavor. It would change the hydrology performance of the entire wash, which eventually connects to the LA River, impacting its hydrology function. What we have found is that if there is an appetite to move forward with the northern segments, we would have to do additional study later on. What we've also found is that this may not be the wisest use of money if we were to move forward with this project. This is the least dense areas of the city. These are largely kind of suburban, single family, not a lot of commercial. You can get to Montrose within, a 5-10 minute ride from there. But the usership, the ridership in this area, or even just walking, is not going to be nearly as high. We wouldn't quite get the same bang for the buck in terms of trying to provide a public amenity. And also the residents there have voiced their opinion that they don't see a need for it. So as part of that, as we move forward with the recommendation to City Council in the fall, what we're going to recommend is that we are going to start this project from the basin, which would be north of Oakmont Country Club. We'll show some examples of that in just a few moments, and really investigate that design from that point south. If there is an appetite from the residents later on to reconsider, we have the opportunity to look at it from a deeper dive and a hydrology perspective. We would do that at a later date if those neighborhoods wished for us to do that. But we did go ahead and develop a couple examples of what that could be like. This is an example looking at kind of the Oakmont Country Club area, if you will, or a Chamford box channel. This does occur just before and just after it as well. So really that kind of area. Opportunities now as we get wider, we can start separating paths. This would be a little bit lower at grade. What's missing here is that we don't have kind of overarching or canopy structures that are ultimately going to be put into this. That would have to be necessary, that if we're going to go through the golf club, we would have to do that to protect anybody who is in there, but also the privacy of the users of the golf course. So we've had discussions and conversations about how that could look and what that would look like when we get to that final design for this segment of the work. We'll have that incorporated in, but we'll have some sculptural elements, probably revisiting some of those elements of wood and things like that to provide protection and privacy. But you can see now we're starting to get opportunities for more vegetation, seating areas, things of that nature as this channel gets wider and wider. Could you do that again? There we go. I think I went to sleep. So as we get to wider portions of it, now we can really start to separate those two modes of active transportation. You can see cyclists on the left, pedestrians on the right, corresponding widths for both. Vegetation is starting to become more and more enhanced. We now have spaces for terraced kind of respite from the urban environment areas, if you will. Not a full-on park, not a full-on social space, but a place for somebody to sit down and relax. We've heard feedback and input from others around the community that these are great opportunities for us to incorporate educational elements of what that creek used to be, the native tribes that used to occupy that area, to be able to show, educate, and teach what used to be in this area, and bringing some of that back as part of those design elements. So we could see elements of that incorporated as well. That's something we would largely explore if we did an art master plan as part of this. And then as we get to more urban areas, we get, again, wider. Now we have an opportunity for playground spaces. In the background, you can kind of see it just a little bit. There'll be another image in a moment here of kind of a large sculptural element that goes over a plaza space. So again, more vegetation, more active spaces. This would be more appropriate in more urban areas, closer to the Glen Oaks commercial corridor, downtown, things of that nature. And just another example, this is where we have to start mixing modes just a little bit as we try to achieve some of the objectives for vegetation and planting. Now, when I reference the basin, that is the area just north of Oakmont Country Club. That is intended to really be, or what staff will recommend to council as the real starting point for this next phase of the project. This basin presents a pretty unique opportunity. In fact, when we were down here, we saw tadpoles, frogs, deer, a number of different critters and animals kind of using this space. There's also usually some sort of water always in that space. In rainy season, a significant more amount. This is a pretty unique opportunity for us to create a pretty large kind of park/natural habitat, if you will. So what we've seen from kind of early concepts is really kind of building off of that old Fourth Ward Park idea. These boardwalks that can span across when there is water present, water flowing. It does not impede the use of that space. This really intended to be kind of a quiet, kind of natural, reimagined natural habitat, if you will. We have had conversations with the upper Los Angeles River tributary system in terms of how we can move forward with creating a project that would do more to restore that natural habitat, but kind of create these moments as well. So really this kind of series of boardwalks, not a very active and social space, but something that really brings back that natural habitat, but could still be used by people. And again, going back to that reference point, seeing some of these elements as part of that. Obviously not as dense of an urban environment. We imagine this to be a much more kind of docile, bucolic space, if you will. And earlier I mentioned mobility. These three graphics that you see here on the far left, this is how far you can get on a bicycle between 5 and 30 minutes today. The darker the color, the shorter the trip. So there's really kind of deep, dark, purple spaces. That's about a 5-minute trip. You start getting into those oranges and yellows, you're in 25, 30-minute territory. So you can get to West Glendale pretty sufficiently. You can get into South Glendale pretty sufficiently. But if we were to pursue this WASH project and we were to just use the existing access points that are there today, and those are separated by every 1.5 miles, 2 miles or so, you can see that range in the center graphic starts to get much, much greater. You can start to access places like Glendale Community College in a shorter period of time, Glorieta Tennis Park, Verdugo Park. Being able to open up and unlock some of those green space opportunities for residents in other parts of the city on a safe, connected pathway. That really at the essence is what this project is trying to achieve. Safe, connected mobility, active transportation, and being able to connect assets and resources. If we were to look at enhanced network of get down points and access points, the graphic you see on the far right, you see that range gets even greater. We're actually working on a new map now that shows how deep we can actually penetrate into South Glendale so that someone who is living in South Glendale, which is a park-starved area of the city, can actually access some of these parks that are along the route. And again, there are several, and there's several opportunities to create new ones. There's Fremont Park, there's other spaces along there that can be transformed. And when I say mobility and connecting to those kind of significant spaces, again, we have Glendale Community College, we have our corridor here at the Civic Campus, and a number of different opportunities for development to really kind of enliven that corridor from a commercial and employment perspective. That is going to be located in very close proximity to the WASH. We have our downtown, and then even connections into West Glendale with the NoHo Metro BRT. This would actually provide a direct access, even with existing access points, to the Verdugo WASH, to the BRT, and where some of those stops would be located on Glen Oaks. So it starts to open up that corridor as well. So it's not just about what is directly on the WASH, what's directly facing it, but how these points can pair up with other projects, other mobility projects, other active transportation projects, and expand that range of mobility. And obviously this would connect to the Los Angeles River with the NoHo to Metro BRT as well. We can start establishing connections to Burbank, to Los Angeles to the south as well. So some of the things that we've done in terms of public engagement, stakeholder working groups, a number of different things. And actually, this doesn't list all of them, but we have done a number of in-person neighborhood meetings. That's where we were able to really solicit that input and feedback from the northern neighborhoods who really didn't express a desire for this project, really kind of informing what that recommended alternative will be to City Council. We've also done a larger scale event that was done on multiple sites. We did some essentially an open storefront here in downtown. We also did a location of Verdugo Park and Fremont Park soliciting feedback. We've done a number of different meetings with different various stakeholder groups, different social and recreational groups around the city as well, really trying to solicit that feedback, how people would use the WASH, how they perceive this project, and some of their input and feedback. We have what we call a stakeholder working group, but really this is kind of a technical advisory group, if you will. It's made up of people who are really kind of experts in those different goals that this project has. So experts in multimodal transportation from the Bike Walk Glendale group, experts in terms of sustainability and nature and wildlife from the Arroyo and Foothills Conservancy, learning from the lessons of the Los Angeles River. We have representatives from them who have participated as well. So a group of people that are really kind of focused from a technically minded perspective. If this project were to move into next phases, we would start to set up additional stakeholder working groups that would really look at more nuanced information that we need to get back. Those who live or work or have a business directly on the wash, making sure that our responses to design and safety are addressing their concerns, likely keeping this technical working group together as well, but really expanding this as we dig deeper into the project and look at the different phases. We also launched a specific website to the project. What we had asked residents, what attributes were important to you? And the three most important were really establishing those pedestrian and cyclist routes, opportunities for open space, and privacy and safety. What we learned from that survey, what we've learned from the public meetings is that there largely is very enthusiastic support for the project, but there also is some cautious and some caution, some hesitation. They want to make sure that it is still safe. There are a number of different things. We actually have an internal stakeholder working group as well, composed of police, fire, parks and community services, public works, sustainability, to help inform what can we do from that perspective. So when we look at things like public safety, call boxes, not pictured in these renderings, would be incorporated into those. We could have different kind of patrols. Much of this wash is visible from the street, so patrols would be able to see into it as well. But a number of different initiatives. Right now, our design team is putting together a kit of parts that would be applied to these different segments that could respond to those safety and privacy concerns as well. And all of those will be unveiled as we move forward. Excuse me. We asked the question, how supportive are you of a reimagined wash? On a scale of 1 to 5, average came out to be about a 4. We're looking at just a shade under about 1,000 responses to this particular survey. This is actually one of our better participated surveys that we've seen. We have some other subsequent surveys as well that have asked for opinions regarding the designs. What we saw is a very large emphasis on the more green, the more natural habitat we can incorporate into it, the better the responses were. We also had a number of different surveys that asked opinions on some of these precedent projects. How do you feel about something like this being applied? And that also helped to inform the visions that you see today. This is a survey that we still keep up on a revolving basis. We have a subscriber list that's part of that as well whenever we do update with the designs. Any final designs, final report will be posted, and our subscribers will be notified there as well. So next steps in this project. Again, this is a visioning stage. This is just to try to get our feet wet, understand what's possible here, and then where do we move forward from that point. We expect to complete this. Again, this is our first touch point with the boards and commissions. We plan on going to TPC, sustainability, parks and community services as well to get their feedback, which will be incorporated into that report that we anticipate taking to City Council at the end of summer, right at the beginning of the fall of this year. We need to identify sources to conduct that next level of study if City Council directs us to do that. That would include environmental review. We actually just finished an application for a grant today to try to secure funds for that. And then looking at some potential early implementation ideas. We were approached about some potential funding opportunities for the basin itself as we looked at that kind of initial concept, those boardwalks, restored natural habitat. There may be an opportunity this fall to secure some funding to move forward with that part of the project and really kind of realize that vision. This is being done concurrently, or the next phase will be done concurrently with the bicycle transportation plan. So this is a chance for us to update that, include this project, but also look at those networks that tie into it, ensuring that we are creating a network of safe bicyclist and pedestrian infrastructure. So those are two projects that are kind of running in tandem. As you know, we recently adopted the citywide pedestrian plan as well. So again, there's some opportunities for some synergy between these two projects. And then we're also looking at integration with the Metro BRT and the West Glendale protected bicycle infrastructure that was proposed. As part of that project, Metro is committed to building protected bicycle infrastructure along Glen Oaks that would actually be separated from traffic, unlike the current conditions today, which are exposed, as part of the implementation of Metro BRT. That's an opportunity that we see that can really tie into the Verdugo Wash, tie into some of those access points, really unlock that western portion of the city. So we're working in tandem with all these other initiatives and many more as well that will help inform this as we move forward. But that next phase would really look at refined engineering, refined hydrology study, master plan of the balance of the route, and then environmental review and construction documents is what we will be pursuing at that next phase. So that concludes my presentation. As I mentioned, what we're looking for is any feedback and input. I'm happy to answer any questions. There's likely a lot of content that hasn't been discussed here as I try to keep this brief.
Oh, thank you. That was a wonderful presentation. And do we have any, yes,
I could,
go ahead.
if you guys don't mind. Well, I just want to first and foremost commend you, Bradley, as well as our staff for putting together such a thorough analysis. That really was great to be a part of and to see all the work you guys have done. I just had a few quick questions. For the elevated portions, is there any issue in terms of rain permeating through, or is the thought that that would all go into the design so it would still get into the bottom of the basin, or would there be gaps on the actual side to just allow it to go straight down?
All of them, actually. So there would be opportunities to create gaps. Again, we don't want to touch those walls. We don't want to compromise the structural integrity that's there. Plus, from a safety and privacy perspective, we may pull that in, the route itself. So there would be opportunities for water to come through there. There would be opportunities to capture water with the vegetated kind of planting wells that would be there. We were looking at opportunities for runnels that could capture water and move that along the route, but then also looking at kind of impervious surface in many ways where water could penetrate down and get into the wash itself. So really all three of those would be at play.
Got it. And then I think you briefly touched on it. On the western portion of the map, would it also connect to the current line that's on the LA River that runs, I guess, parallel with the 5?
Correct. That would be the intent. You have Confluence Park down there as well. We had an early concept that was developed there, but we've kind of stepped back from that for a bit. You know, there's a number of pedestrian bridges that are being proposed and built in that area. We want to dig a little bit deeper into that and figure out how we can best connect before we kind of put out a design on that.
Okay, and then just lastly, to touch on the safety part of it, is the plan, I know it's still pretty early, but is the thought that it would be open for only during the day or certain hours of the day to accommodate and kind of make it safer from that standpoint?
Very good question, and actually one I failed to mention in the presentation. Right now, what we're looking at is likely this would be open from dawn to dusk, like any other Glendale park. There's some differing school of thoughts on that. There's obviously the work that we need to go into going in and locking it up at the end of every day. So there's a number of things. You know, any next phase of this work would include an operations and maintenance plan that would help us investigate what would be the best alternative there. When it comes to significant rain events, they would be shut down entirely. People would not be able to use that in the anticipation of a significant rain event.
Got it. Okay. I mean, I'm open to hear your guys' questions.
Do you have any questions?
You mentioned that there, on some part of it, you're thinking that you're going to have extra access to the wash. How many access points that we have right now? I missed that part.
I'd have to go back and look at the number. It's not many. It's under 10 if I'm not mistaken.
So I look at the map that you provided. If you have more access points, we saw the traffic. It's the colors were getting darker, basically. So is that I'm looking at the cost point. You know, is that something that, you know, you have to spend more money to have more access points? Is that something that is going to make a huge difference as far as the people accessing to having access to it? It's on. I guess I'm far. That's why. Yeah.
Talking softly.
Yeah.
It would obviously have a cost to it. What we're doing here in this first phase, we'll have a high-level cost estimate, and that will look at what we would perceive as the maximum number of access points and factor that into the overall cost. We actually don't expect that to drive up cost all that much because the existing access points that we have today would just need to be modified in a few ways in terms of making it ADA accessible. A lot of them are built for trucks and vehicles to get down there. Others we could access from our existing right-of-way. We would not be doing this from anyone's private property or trying to take any property in order to do that. We would do that from the existing intersections along the wash. And the get-downs would be relatively simple depending on the height of that wash.
All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Fuentes?
Thank you again for a very good presentation. Very keen, down to the point. my only question is where the wash narrows down to where you can't have the bicycle and the pedestrian. I'm assuming it's going to be more of pedestrian access at that point, and you're going to route the bicycle access above or somewhere.
We had looked at that, and in fact, I believe one of the
I did see
renderings
it.
actually shows that. We've kind of pulled back on that there because we need to maintain, in some of those locations, there was an existing access easement for LA County to be able to do maintenance. So it wouldn't be a good idea for us to use that portion of it for cyclists. What we would likely see, and you see this in a lot of different projects, there are certain locations where cyclists are just encouraged to dismount. That's just not an area for that kind of rapid movement. What I would also say is the areas where it's that narrow are the areas that we will probably not move forward with in this next phase right now. All the points that we would be moving forward with are wide enough to be able to separate the two modes.
Okay. Also didn't see, it may be too early, lighting provision for the 9.5 mile.
Yes, lighting will be key. Lighting will be key from a safety perspective and also just usability. That is something that there will be some kind of initial review, initial proposals for it, but it would also need to kind of dig deeper because that starts to really enter into that operations and maintenance and how those things look.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a few questions here. I know that it's probably too early to develop any type of a budget figures, but you did touch on a little bit on the source of the funds. So, what is available right now? Where is it coming from? And what is the overall, like, basic minimum, the features that you are talking about, doing that type of a improvements, what is the capital requirements for that? And what is the overall the project timeline? Right now it's in the study phase. So, when it moves on to the more of a, this is a great project. I mean, when this is one of the presentation where my eyes just, got bigger. And normally it doesn't get big. But anyways, so, this is an exciting project. So I'm really interested in really learning more about this. And so, what is the overall timeline? And then when you answer that, then I have a few comments on the features of the some of the presentation you gave.
I would say largely a lot of those questions are to be determined still. We're still working out what that high level cost estimate would look like. What we're trying to kind of wrap our heads around is what would it cost on a per mile basis? And we say per mile because this is a 9.5 miles, or if we take off those northern segments, it's about 7.5, somewhere in that area. We're not going to build 7 miles of a trail at one time. That's just not going to be feasible. So we're trying to figure out what that would be from a per mile cost. So we have a phasing plan that is being developed now that would really look at this in kind of 4 to 5 distinct phases. Once that number will be part of the final report that will be released. What we do know, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Space 134 project that had been moving along, this would be significantly cheaper, and it would probably be more impactful and better bang for our buck in terms of how far we can reach into the community and create open space in these opportunities. So a lot of those things will come out in that final report. That includes an operations and maintenance anticipated budget as well, everything from taking care of the vegetation to policing the facility.
So, I'd like to follow up on Commissioner Mennesion's comment regarding access to these places, because some of the areas are really, it's got good natural habitats and it's wide enough where, I've seen not only in this country but in Korea and other places where they've really made that Cheonggyecheon. That project made him president of that country. But there are some like fountains, some water plays, and and then there's a night walk there and cascades. That type of features I think will draw a lot of the kids or a lot of the people down, into their area. And really, the reason why people are not accessing it because it's it's not accessible, easily accessible, and it really is not inviting. But if you can create not just natural ponds, but you can accumulate water to have this type of features in there. I think those things will, naturally invite people to their, not only to rest, but to actually play. And some of the things that I've seen is that like pedestrian walkways or bridges with some LED lights, to make it really, spruce it up and things like that. So those are the little things that that I'd like to make comments on.
And thank you for bringing up the South Korea project. Actually, that is actually a reference point that we're using as well, particularly around the confluence between LA River and that, because there actually is an existing cascade steps that are there. We're actually looking at that project to see how some of those elements could be incorporated, and that is a much more vibrant social area. Plus, it's the depth is much more significant. We have a lot of room to work with. And in terms of the LED lighting and things like that, we really want to dig into that deeper with an art master plan. We have requested the funding for that. If we do move forward, we have been told that we can secure that funding because there are opportunities, whether it's light or as we've learned in our discussions with the Tongva tribe, they have given us a very, very deep and very, very rich history that we could convey along that route in many ways that, as you're saying, could really kind of spruce that up, jazz that up in many ways, but also serves as an educational opportunity, an acknowledgement of what that space was before and how important it was. So we really think that that's going to be a great opportunity for us to really dig into some of those pieces.
Thank you, Mr. Calvert. And yeah,
You mentioned about the Glen Oaks corridor, that there's going to be some commercial shops and all that stuff. That's a huge area, or it's a very small portion of the?
It's kind of a reference point that we make when we discuss, because it's where you transition from some of the single family as you're moving south from Glen Oak Community College, and then you get into where there are more commercial uses that back up against the wash. I'll use We're Pouring as an example. They're a restaurant bar right there. That kind of area there is what we actually hear from the public quite frequently. They really want to be able to access there because there's a number of restaurants, commercial services, things like that.
Thank you.
yeah.
I just want to give a few comments because we're not voting on anything, so we're just leaving you guys with our thoughts. So I think right next to that portion, one issue we could run into is there's a portion of the wash that's directly abutting several single-family homes, kind of near the Ross Moines area. So I'm just curious if you guys have had discussions with the residents in that specific portion. I think it's going to be less than a mile of the actual project, but I could imagine that they would at least want greater depth for privacy purposes because it's right up on a lot of their backyards. Is that something you guys have addressed or spoken to them on?
Yes, actually, we have done a number of meetings up and down the wash, and graciously enough, they have actually hosted us in their backyard so that they could show us this is what it's like. This is the concerns they have or the wishes that they have. We did not do it on the Ross Point. We actually did it on the south side. We have offered a few opportunities if anybody else would like to meet with us, but we did have those discussions, which if I won't go back to it, but if you remember the second slide where you saw the pathways were now lower, that was in that response. To provide alternatives where you're not looking into someone's backyard, you're not looking into someone's living room. That's also where we may see the width of it not go all the way out to the walls so that we wouldn't have issues of people trying to climb in or out, stacking vegetation along there so that people can't make it through that space. So as I mentioned earlier, the design team is finalizing what we're calling kind of a kit of parts, different scenarios, different solutions that could be applied based on those needs.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll just conclude my thoughts by echoing Chairperson Lee's overall sentiment on the project. I mean, this is something I'm very excited to see presented in front of the commission. I think, we all know that Glendale could use enhancements and added green space, whether it's in the downtown specific plan area or in the city altogether. So it's just something I'm excited to see more about down the line. And thank you guys again for all your work on it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Calvert.
Thank you.
I mean, this community development updates is very exciting. So can we have more of these updates?
We got more projects.
This is great.
From your lips. Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
It will give me a chance to ride my bicycle more often. Verdugo, you just cars pass you by.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. So I guess that's it. Any more updates?
The only other update I would say is the commission will be dark on in July, the first meeting in July, which I believe is the 6th. but we potentially have a few items tentatively scheduled for the 20th. So I wish the commission a very happy 4th of July. In the meantime,
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I'd like to, yeah, anyone,
adjournment?
Yeah.
Entertain?
Yes, entertaining German.
Motion and second?
okay, so meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay. Great.